And we're live. Good afternoon, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I'm your ever-loving host, Shorty, and today we're coming from my front room. My dog is hiding over there at the moment. Obviously, we couldn't handle the fame of being on a live video review a couple of weeks or so ago. So she's hiding and just staring at me and occasionally scratching. But I am home, and I'm going to say this might actually not be a 5-minute review. It might go a little bit over. Because today I am reviewing Dark Interlude. This is a follow-up to Escape, which frustratingly totally managed to pass me by when it first came out. It's very, very frustrating because I've since read it in trade, and it's absolutely freaking awesome. It's one of the best things I've read in quite some time, and I might break my rule and actually put it in as my best of the year, or one of my best of the year list, even though it's not a comic book that came out fully in this year. It's a collection that I've read. But it is so damn good that when I knew they were doing a sequel of sorts, an interlude, maybe, I had to pick it up. The only problem is it's very hard to discuss this sequel without discussing the thing it's following on from. There's simply too much interconnectivity, including the fact that it's not supposed to be a sequel. And the narrator for it, one Henry, yes, that is his name, hates the idea of it being a sequel. But he is such a horrendous, ridiculous, overwrought, terrible human being that you can kind of just ignore anything he says anyway. He spends most of the first book lying to you, the reader, as his voice of the narrator. I mean, yes, don't get me wrong, the untrustworthy narrator is absolutely fine. I like that as a concept. But he takes it to such a grandiose thing when you literally see what is happening, because it's a comic book. You get to see his actions, and then he lies to you about them, and then lies to himself about them, like makes up justification and realization that he can't get away with doing it, and sometimes just absolutely fabricates things, creates himself an entire world where he is the victim, beset by enemies, even though he's actually, for the most part, doing kind of okay for himself and getting by without really too much effort. But there's a dark undercurrent going on throughout that, and that is the big thing that happens at the end of the first book, Escape. And without knowing about that, I'm afraid nothing that really happens in this one is going to make a huge amount of sense. They do deal with it a little, but I'm going to have to tell you what happened, and I have to tell you quite a little bit about what happens in Escape, which makes sense. Hence, it's being longer than 5 minutes because it's going to take some doing. But he's a struggling author. He's basically doing. Turning audio into type kind of thing, or translation. But he keeps messing around and adding his own things and saying he's better than the person who's originally doing it. And as a result of which, he almost constantly in threat of fire. The only reason is because he's friends with a very, very famous author who actually supports him and puts up with him being an absolutely terrible, ridiculous excuse for a human being. And it turns out, as you read through the book and get to the end, the reason he's doing that is because this famous author of a genre work, kind of overblown genre fiction. Sorry, my dog's just appeared there. Remy, come up. This is my dog. He's basically, from a very young age, was abusing Henry. Excuse me. So his Henry's actions seem to kind of make a little bit of sense. He was basically doing these things because he was a victim. And he was a broken man because his childhood was taken away from him in a horrendous, violent fashion. But it doesn't really excuse some of the things he does, and the fact that he does it in such a really weird, overwrought way. And then you get to the second book, where he spends quite a lot of time trying to not tell you about what happened in Escape and lets other characters do it, but then takes the mickey out of the fact that his character doing it. He literally has people in the Escape who don't know what's going on, have it explained to them, and then laments the fact that it's such a horrendous coincidence that this happens, and that kind of would not happen in real life. But later on, you have people discussing his actual sequel to the book, which he never wrote, by the way. The original book that came out, Terror Forming, was one that he'd stolen from his mentor and had published under his own name, because he's a plagiarist as well as everything else. And he was writing a sequel for it, and they wanted to get it done. And they're discussing his sequel by simply saying, but they've put in a redemption arc for this most unredeemable of characters. He is an absolutely horrendous human being. There is absolutely no way anyone will go along with it. And somebody else is like, oh, yes, they will. This is just fans of genre fiction. They don't care about such things. They just want to read things that are written in an interesting way to make it think like they're thinking. They don't actually want to think about it. And if we even tell them that what we're doing is completely ridiculous and there's absolutely no way it makes sense, they think we're just doing satire, which is what this is. It's brilliant. It is so unbelievably meta, and I absolutely love it because it could be terrible. It could come across as the worst kind of pastiche if it wasn't so well written, if it wasn't so lovingly done. It could have just been a horrendous mess from start to finish, with people who are fans of not only genre fiction but also the comic book form in its entirety, lamenting how bad it's gotten that this was allowed to be made. But it is so well written. Sorry, my dog is being very adorable here. It is so well written that you have to just go along with it. You get dragged into it. It is spectacular. And it's such a good follow-up as well. It makes perfect sense within the narrative confines of what he's doing, including stuff that's happening in the Fearscape with other heroes who've been there to save the world from the greatest of all fears, carrying on the story and what's happened to the Muse and the other characters in his world, all have very solid ongoing stories. And there's even a brilliant reveal very late in the book of somebody who seems to be a sympathetic character turning out to also not be that great. And it's done in such a way that makes perfect sense. There is no sudden jarring leaps. There's no shock for the sake of shock value. It's done in a way that makes perfect sense, and I've got to applaud that. Yes, I know I've gone over, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the artwork as well. I'm not going to try and show you because I've actually watched back the video of the last one I did from home, and you can barely see the pages. But I will say it's absolutely beautiful, and it's simplistic in a way which I absolutely admire. It's also very, very vibrant. The colour use on it is absolutely spectacular. When you're dealing with a fantasy world called Fearscape, you get like the license to really go over the top, and the artist absolutely embraces that, and the colouring just jumps off the page. But it also has this really nice kind of fantasy realism to it. Yes, the people are fictional characters, like there's an entire a muse made of light, but they do look perfectly normal within their environs. The muse is wearing sandals with no socks, and it's just one of those things that looks perfectly fine, even though it's being made of gold light. And everything about it is just great. To be honest, it might be that this is potentially a little bit too late for this one to make it into my best of the year. So I think I'm only going to have one more issue, and it's not really like enough to get into it. But based on how much I absolutely love Fearscape, I think that's going to make it into my best of the year. And this, as a follow-up, has every sign of the potential to be even better than it. It even includes a whole bunch of exposition, which I usually would complain about, but it's done in such an excellent way. So that's the opening page. And that's page 2. Or it's just a letter that Henry writes to his readers. And the thing that actually made me go and read Fearscape is the fact that this work was kind of put out there because somebody championed it, which is not an uncommon thing in comic book industry. Somebody's more famous who reads it and puts it in front of their people. That person had to write an apology fairly recently for some terrible, terrible things they did. But the apology was written in such a way that it's kind of hard to actually see remorse. It more feels like it was just somebody going through the motions and getting like trying to move their story on from that. And there's a line in this which just sums it perfectly, because that person helped get this created. It felt like they had to make some kind of like nod towards it. And he's literally talking about killing. The attempted, some might argue partially successful, familiaricide was entirely my fault. I take full responsibility for murdering Arthur. I promise to treat this as a learning experience and do better in future. Such a non-apology apology that people have already been commenting on that it was clearly a reference to this despicable human being in the real world. And who knows, maybe the idea that he will be trying to be remorseful and could actually go on a redemption arc is just as ridiculous. And maybe that's a subtext that's going around the entire book, in which case I absolutely love it even more. Okay, I'm over 9 minutes. I'm rapidly heading towards like twice as long as I should do for comics in 5 minutes. But as you can probably tell from how much I'm ranting about this one, I absolutely adore it. I've got in my store one spare copy. It was ordered just because I loved the cover before I'd read Fearscape. It goes back quite well. If anyone wants it, get in contact really quickly, because I don't know if I'll be able to get any more in. But if you're watching this and you've got your own comic book store somewhere, tell them you want to read Fearscape. No doubt they'll be able to get hold of a copy for you. They may even have some on the shelf. I've got at least a couple of copies in my store. And you should jump on right from the beginning and fully embrace it and enjoy it. It's a perfect example of what the form can do in such a brilliant, brilliant way to actually pull apart what the form is supposed to do and what it sometimes fails to do, not just in comic books, but in genre fiction as well. Genuinely amazing read. It looks fantastic, and honestly, you're not going to be disappointed. I can't imagine anyone I'm friends with who likes comic books who wouldn't enjoy it. Anyway, that's me hitting the 10-minute mark. Double length episode for you. Tomorrow I'm back in the shop because I've got more things to post out, and I've got some people coming to collect things, so I'll do a regular one, much better lit, with a far better camera. Take it easy. Bye. End stream. Sorry about this. My laptop is still being a bit crap, so you've got to get me for a few more seconds.